Today, the House Republicans voted almost unanimously to stop the Environmental Protection Agency from cleaning up carbon pollution from power plants. Even worse, all but 3 House Republicans voted to deny the science of climate change. This is an embarrassing day for the U.S. House of Representatives. Kofi Annan, the former Secretary General of the United Nations, wrote in the Washington Post earlier this year, quote, "Climate change is the biggest challenge of our time. It threatens the well-being of hundreds of millions of people today and many billions more in the future," end quote. Robert Rubin, the former Treasury Secretary, said recently, quote, "There are a lot of really significant, monumental issues facing the global economy, but this supersedes them all," end quote. But today, House Republicans voted that this monumental issue, this biggest challenge of our time, does not even exist. I have a message for my Republican colleagues. You're in charge of the House. You have a lot of power and can rewrite the laws of our nation, but you cannot change the laws of nature. 3 years ago, we considered a similar bill, and here's what Nature, one of the world's leading science journals, said at the time, quote, "Misinformation was presented as fact. Truth was twisted, and nobody showed any inclination to listen to scientists, let alone learn from them. It has been an embarrassing display, not just for the Republican Party, but also for Congress and the U.S. citizens it represents. It's hard to escape the conclusion that the U.S. Congress has entered the intellectual wilderness," end quote. Since that embarrassing display 3 years ago, the world has learned a lot about the dangers of climate change. There have been reams of new studies confirming the science of climate change and signals from climate change, from melting glaciers and shrinking Arctic sea ice to rising seas and bigger storms. They're becoming more apparent every day. In the United States, we've experienced dangerous storms like Sandy, which destroyed buildings along the East Coast. We've had record droughts in the Midwest and the West. We have seen forests incinerated and lives lost in massive wildfires. But it doesn't appear that the Republican majority in the House has learned anything. We're living in a congressional bubble with no apparent awareness of what is happening in the world around us. I'm the top Democrat on the Energy and Commerce Committee in the House. This is the committee with jurisdiction over the nation's energy and environmental policy. Along with Representative Bobby Rush from Illinois, I have written 31 letters over the last 3 years asking the committee to hold a hearing with the scientists so we could learn what's happening. But the Republicans have refused even to hear what the scientists have to say. I want to read to you the text of the amendment that my colleague, Representative Jan Schakowsky from Illinois, offered on the floor. It said, quote, "Congress accepts the scientific finding that greenhouse gas pollution is contributing to long-lasting changes in our climate that can have a range of negative effects," end quote. Do you know what happened to this amendment? It wasn't going to change the bill in any way. It was simply an expression. And it was defeated. Every Republican, except for 3, voted against it. They voted to deny that climate change is occurring. The United States is a major contributor to climate change. It cannot be stopped without us. We have a moral responsibility to act, but the Republican majority has voted overwhelmingly for a bill that does just the opposite. It makes the problem worse by preventing EPA from acting. They voted to let China leap ahead of us in the race to build the clean energy economy of the future. And they ignored our moral obligation to protect the planet, children and grandchildren. Coal-fired power plants are the largest single source of carbon pollution in the country. Today, there's no limit on how much carbon pollution these power plants can emit. That's why President Obama directed the Environmental Protection Agency to use its existing authority under the Clean Air Act to require power plants to control carbon pollution. But the bill passed by the House Republicans today would stop EPA from issuing any rules and allow these plants to keep emitting unlimited amounts of carbon pollution. Republicans complain that they don't like EPA's approach, but they won't even admit climate change is a problem, much less accept the president's invitation to work together on a solution. Instead, they deny the problem, block EPA's action, and weaken the Clean Air Act. I've asked them, if you don't like what EPA is doing, what's your plan? But as their votes show today, their plan is to deny the problem and make it worse. That's a shameful approach, and future generations will be appalled. Thank you.